Good morning and welcome to Prince George's Chamber on the Move. This is Rhonda Slade, President and Chief Executive Officer, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to our brand new talk show on 1580 AM. We have in the studio today two very illustrious guests I'm so excited to have in my midst. We have Ms. Octavia Caldwell, who's the CEO of ROC Consultants in Fort Washington, Maryland, who's also the chair of our Legislative Action Committee, and Senator David Harrington, former Maryland State Senator, County Council member, and former mayor of Bladensburg. We are very honored to have you both. Welcome. Good morning.
Good morning.
Delighted to be here.
Good morning. Well, the purpose of our show that we've just begun is to spotlight local businesses and to highlight issues that impact businesses in Prince George's County and the surrounding area, and to build awareness that Prince George's is a great destination for business. And I thought it was applicable to have you all as our guest today, since today is also the first day of the General Assembly session. So we need to help business owners understand the importance of advocacy and what that is and how that will impact their business and their bottom line. So first of all, I think it would be right to actually kind of give a definition of advocacy, if you will. So either one of you, if you'd like to answer that question, what exactly is advocacy?
Well, advocacy in a policy frame, what that would mean is one that when you're informed, you can't have strong advocacy without being informed. And second, that you understand the process in which policy is made. And then lastly, and perhaps even more importantly, that you're putting yourself in providing a position or a stance on a particular issue. And so what that would mean is that you could take that stance individually, or you could, which I think works better in the Maryland General Assembly, is that you begin to take a stance collectively. So you join other people of similar interest, who may be united in a certain stance, and then begin to lay out strategies that would then bring you a winnable position.
Octavia, why would you say that advocacy is important to businesses and particularly to small businesses?
People begin businesses because they want to be profitable, and there are legislative issues and policies which can restrict profitability or economic development, and so it's important to be involved in advocacy so that you can help frame the environment in which you conduct your business.
Right. So as you mentioned, Senator Harrington and also Octavia, it does have a definite impact on our bottom line. So what advice would you give to businesses to, as you say, be part of the collective, to have their voice heard and to participate in the whole process?
Well, I think that particularly in the General Assembly is know which committees really affect business more. So when I was in the Senate, for example, the committees of Budget and Taxation and the Committee of Finance are those that directly deal with taxing issues, that deal with budget issues, and they more directly affect this business. The other committees, Judicial Proceedings and Environmental Health and Education, on a larger peripheral issues may affect business. For example, environmental issues. So know where the committees are, and for business, just keep on reading the newspapers and be able to have connections like with the chamber, be able to have ongoing discussions of what's going on, because there's no way that one business can know everything that's going on in Annapolis or everything that's going on in the federal government. But having something like the chamber, having a committee that's looking at these issues is very important, so that then you can bring those important issues to the table and have some very deep discussions around then what level of advocacy and what levels of strategies you're going to engage in to really then make sure that your interest is being represented.
And Rhonda, I'd like to amplify the being informed, which is very easy with technology these days. We need to read newspapers. You get email notifications when committees are meeting, when activities are being considered. And certainly I have to mention that the Legislative Action Committee of the Prince George's Chamber is an excellent way to stay informed. Being informed allows you to be part of the framing as opposed to just always reacting after something has occurred.
I think that if I could join you on that last point, because many times what we see is that people react, and by the time they react, the decision's already made, quite frankly. And so having something like a committee in the chamber helps you begin to figure out strategies and at a time when perhaps things are still being considered. So that being informed, but also being a part of a network is very key, because many times by time things are on the Senate floor, or in the case of even being on the county council, by the time it's on the dais on the county council, quite honestly, those decisions have already been made.
Right.
The die has already been cast.
So what would you suggest, or what type of advice would you give to business owners to get in front of that so that they're able to affect the change before it's already made, the decisions have already been made?
I think the first thing is to really, where businesses are located, become very familiar with those where the people who are representing the areas where businesses are located, and create then a constant dialogue, a constant interest. So make sure you're on. Many times representatives and legislators have email blasts. Make sure you're on those email blasts. Make sure that you're attending those community meetings. You know, oftentimes business does not attend the community meetings, and they should. Make sure that you're also submitting things in writing to your representative. There's nothing more engaging for a representative than when you receive something in writing.
Right. Wow. And writing can also be in the form of an email.
In the form of an email. But I also have to say, and maybe I'm old school in this, so I'll admit. But I when I was an elected official, I reacted more when I received something in the mail.
Right.
Because what that told me was somebody took the effort to write it down, to put a stamp on an envelope, and to put it in the mailbox, as opposed to email. Yeah, they might have gotten their laptop and wrote something. But when you get something, when you get a letter, then I directed my staff. I said, look, you find out who this person is, and you make sure that we answer that response.
Well, that's a very good point. That's a very good point, because people these days do not take the time actually to sit down and write a letter. So when you know that we do, it's very important. So that's very key. So we've mentioned that there are different avenues and ways to connect, and that we at the Chamber are here to help businesses do that. We're about to take a break in a few moments, but before we do that, when we come back, I'd like to go into more detail. Senator Harrington, you came in and gave a really great training at the Chamber on advocacy do's and don'ts, and so if we can, in our next segment, maybe we can talk a little bit about some of those key points and kind of delve deeper in that, and for our listeners today. But in the meantime, can you just give us a quick update on some of the things that you've been doing since you've left the State House in Annapolis?
Well, very, very quickly, I've been engaging in health policy work and looking at policies through a lens of improving communities. And many times we constrain health to whether or not you have access to a doctor. My work now, and I work with a group known as Common Health Action, but what we do is we look at how do we strengthen access to food, how we strengthen better sidewalks, parks, so that because if you have that in your neighborhoods, the likelihood is that you'll have improved health. And so there's policy around that, particularly with zoning and what have you, that would help, that influence health more so than your genetic makeup.
Right. Well, that sounds like great work, And I know we need to give a plug also to your beautiful wife Cheryl and her new business that's here in the county.
Well, yeah, and it may be somewhat of a disconnect if I get my health work, but she is. Thank you for the plug out. She and I'm very, very proud of her. She's opened up her dream shortcake bakery about a minor commercial, 4700 Rhode Island Avenue.
Exactly.
And you all have tried the goods, and she makes the best scones and cupcakes. I would dare say.
The
Best
very best
cupcakes.
red velvet cupcakes on earth. Definitely. So we're so happy to have a new.
But it's
business.
still healthy for you.
Very
There's fresh
healthy for you.
ingredients,
Fresh
fresh
ingredients.
ingredients, no preservatives,
Right.
no chemicals.
Exactly.
Everything is baked on the premises.
We also might want to mention, for those who may not know, that the Legislative Action Committee of the Chamber meets every Monday at 8:30 a.m. at the Chamber office at 4640 Forbes Boulevard. And anyone that's listening is invited to come and join our conversations and discussions as we monitor what's going on, policy and legislation as it affects the business community.
Exactly, definitely. We will continue to highlight that as well, because that's a very active committee, and we're very thankful for your service, Octavia, as the chair of that committee, and all the great work that you're doing to represent the chamber as well. So we are about to take a break in just a few moments, but beforehand, I also want to announce, and we'll talk about it even more as we go into further in the show, that the chamber is having our business day in Annapolis on January 19th. We are going to take several hundred business people as our goal to Annapolis to interact with our elected officials. In the morning, we're going to partner with the Maryland Chamber of Commerce for their Business Day in Annapolis breakfast, which will feature Congressman Van Hollen, Senate President Mike Miller, and Senate Speaker of the House Mike Bush as the speakers that morning at 7:30 a.m. at the Lowe's Annapolis Hotel. And then we will walk the halls and talk with our legislators and get our issues in front of them from 10 to 12. And then afterwards we'll have our own luncheon, and we'll go into more detail about that when we come back from this break. Thank you to our sponsor, Softcon Enterprises, for allowing us the opportunity to highlight local businesses and to build awareness that Prince George's is a destination for business. Today in the studio we have our illustrious guest, Octavia Caldwell, CEO of RLC Consultants, who's also the chair of the Chamber's Legislative Action Committee, and Senator David Harrington, former Maryland State Senator, County Council Chair, and former Mayor of Bladensburg. So we are very honored to have you both in the studio today. And for those of you who are just joining us, today is also the very first day of the General Assembly session. So we have dedicated this show to educating businesses on advocacy. So we are thankful to have you here, two experts in the field. And before we went to break, Senator Harrington, we were talking about the training that you provided for us at the Chamber on advocacy do's and don'ts. So we do want to give you an opportunity to share with our listeners some of the insight that you gave our chamber members at that wonderful session.
Well, thank you very much, and I really enjoyed having the exchange with business leaders from around the county. And what I would say is that the first thing about in advocacy is understand the structure and how things happen, whether it's in the county government or whether it's in Annapolis. So understand the committee structures especially, and I'll go to more detail on that in a moment, and understand the issues. But I would say three things about advocacy. Number one is be informed. Number two is to be engaged. And number three is avoid confrontation. And so many times, and I'll start with the third first. Many times we see a piece of legislation or some policy being discussed, and we say, "Oh, we got to be against that. We got to rally the troops." And the first thing is that you always put yourself in a negotiable stance, because any bill can be amended. And the likelihood is that the first swath of a bill is always going to be heavily amended. And so that's the ideal stage, and when it gets through committee and what have you, it'll be amended. And so always avoid confrontation and work with the legislator to say, look, here's how you can have our support if you amend the bill.
Right.
The second thing is then be cognizant of the structure, and I talked about the committee structure, because that's really the place where you can have the most effectiveness in amending any sort of legislation. Many times people will wait until the public hearing to say whether or not they like a piece of legislation, and that it's too late.
Right.
You want to get to the committee process to effectuate then the kind of advocacy level of advocacy that you want. But I cannot understate the importance of being informed. Because many times, even when you try to amend something or you try to go through the committee process, there are many, I can't tell you how often people came in without being informed about what they were talking about. So they came with this high level of energy and engagement, but frankly added nothing to the process.
Wow.
And there's no greater way to lose interest among legislators than to be uninformed about what you really want. So concentrate on your ask. What are you asking for? What is the issue that you're trying to get across, and be targeted about that. And I think that those are the things that I would strongly suggest.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's wonderful information. It's very definitely necessary for businesses to follow, and I hope that people will accept it and move forward properly. And Octavia, I know we can help businesses do that through our Legislative Action Committee. So would you like to give some insight again onto as the chair of the committee, and what our plan is for 2012 and the goal for the chamber and the legislative?
I absolutely would, and I'd also like to add to something that David mentioned in terms of being informed. It is just as important to be informed about the process and know where and when the most opportune time to engage in the process is. Both as a former employee in the Office of Management and Budget, and now as a business owner in the county, has sat through a number of legislative hearings at both the state and the county level, and have heard people come in very passionate about the issues, but speaking about something that has absolutely nothing to do with what is being discussed at that particular hearing, which does not put you and your comments in the best light. Mm-hmm. So that was just one thing that, was in a hearing this week, and people were in there, and they were just miles away from the issue that was on the table, and they didn't even realize that's not what they were addressing.
And if I can jump in, that could do more damage than good.
Absolutely.
When a legislator has to sit through just a barrage of comments that have nothing to do with the issue, and then you leave there thinking, okay, well, they understand what we meant. They go back and say, okay, well, we mollified them, we saw them, see you later.
Exactly.
And that is a great point that you made. And so you have to be really targeted about your issue, and even to the point of saying to the legislator, okay, do you know the ask?
Right.
The ask is that you do X, Y, and Z. What can we expect from you? Mm-hmm. And when you leave, you always leave a meeting with that. With that, never leave a meeting with the legislator without knowing and making sure that they understand the ask. But I didn't mean to cut you off. But that's an excellent point that you're making.
Right.
And how businesses can be involved in the ongoing process is, of course, as an active and attending member of the Legislative Action Committee, we inform as well as develop strategy as to how to move and what to do. But our focus this year is going to be, of course, on economic development, and that includes strengthening businesses that are currently operating in the county, as well as attracting new businesses. We will be looking at transit-oriented development. We'll also be focusing on jobs development, activities that will increase creating jobs, which is very much needed when you have people employed and businesses grow and they can hire people and people are working and they're paying taxes and they're able to stimulate the economy with purchases. But if people aren't working, then that's going to negatively impact the economy. And so there's a connection between economic development and building businesses and the general welfare of the residents of Prince George's County.
If I can further, join Octavia in that, many times and this is why the chamber is so important, because individual business people, if you're in a small business or you're even in a large business, you really don't have the time. You're so focused on meeting your bottom line, particularly in this economy. And so here, with the chamber comes in, it provides a structure and a place through which then this advocacy can happen. And where you really want advocacy is when the legislator is even contemplating policy.
Exactly.
So that then, if it's something on economic development, Octavia just mentioned a number of things: transit-oriented development, minority business enterprise, tax credits, whatever those economic policies may be. You want that legislator to be able to say, you know what, I got to talk to the chamber while I'm even contemplating this. And so the chamber then positions itself as a point of negotiation, even while the policy is being contemplated. And I think that's extremely important.
Right.
And so the chamber's role in all this is very key. And you would hope in this legislative process, as legislators begin to contemplate whether or not, and I know you'll get into the issues later on, but whether or not we're going to have a gas tax, whether or not the millionaire's tax is going to be extended, reshaping minority business enterprises, looking at then environmental issues with respect to smart growth. Those kinds of issues, you want the legislator or committee chairs or what have you in leadership to be able to pick up the phone and say, okay, Prince George's Chamber of Commerce, tell us what your concerns or what your levels of concerns have been and your discussion, and help us shape this policy. And that's where you want to be, and that's why it's important for businesses to be a part of the chamber.
Right. Wonderful. Wonderful. Anything you'd like to add to that, Octavia?
Well said, sir.
Well, for those that may be joining us, do you want to give the invitation again to our legislative to participate in our legislative committee?
I absolutely do. The Legislative Action Committee meets every Monday morning at 8:30 in the Chamber's office at 4640 Forbes Boulevard in their conference room, their boardroom. We meet from 8:30 to 10:30, and the time goes entirely too fast because it's even though we have an agenda, there's just so much work to be done, and excellent opportunity for anyone. It doesn't matter if it's a home-based business with one employee or a mega business with thousands of employees. Being there is an excellent place to be.
Exactly. Well said. Again, thank you. And while you're listening to Prince George's Chamber on the Move on 1580 AM, thank you again to Softcon Enterprises, our sponsor for this month. Good morning and welcome back to Prince George's Chamber on the Move. This is Rhonda Slade, President and Chief Executive Officer, and we thank our sponsor, Softcon Enterprises, for allowing us to have this opportunity to highlight local businesses. Today in the studio we have Octavia Caldwell, CEO of ROC Consultants, who is our chair of the Legislative Action Committee at the Prince George's Chamber of Commerce, and Senator David Harrington, former Maryland State Senator, County Council Chair, and Mayor of Bladensburg. Since today is the first day of General Assembly session, we have had a wonderful discussion thus far on the benefits of advocacy and the need for businesses to be engaged, informed, and avoid confrontation as we're dealing with our elected officials as we move forward. We've had some great discussions, but want to ask the question, what legislation do you all expect to come out during the General Assembly in this year 2012, and that will be helpful to the business community and or hurtful?
Well, I think I would, if I can, address something first before I get to that question, and that is that one of the things that I think I failed to mention early on around advocacy is building alliances, and sometimes you may perceive an alliance that may be more of an adversary than someone that you can align with, but you always be situational. So there may be some times when someone may be an advocate for you than be against you. For example, sometimes there may be environmental issues that may clash with sometimes business interest, but there are also plenty of opportunities when those issues can align with one another, and you should take full advantage of that. So, which goes right to then, what are some of the major issues that are going to come up that I've heard from some of my former colleagues? And one of the big issues is going to be the gas tax. The gasoline tax is one, and well, I should back up for a second. The genesis of this is that the transportation fund has been whittled down because it's been used to help fund some of the deficits in the general budget.
I think rated is the way they describe it.
I was trying to be diplomatic, but certainly I wouldn't disagree with the chair of the policy committee. And so rated is a very, very good word, and so it has been. Octavia is absolutely right. And so it's been rated to the extent that now, with the kind of transit-oriented development that Octavia spoke about earlier, is almost impossible without some sort of replenishing of that fund. The gasoline tax is being seen as one that replenishes the fund, but it's very controversial. And business leaders should be very cognizant of this because, on the one hand, you're right, it provides some level of funding for transit-oriented development projects and other kind of road projects, which helps with improving infrastructure. However, for the consumer, this is huge, and for the business person, this is huge. For the person, for example, that depends upon getting goods and services through trucks and with other means, well, that may be an increase, in those goods and services. So this is a key issue, and business should be very much involved in this discussion. There also will be some environmental issues that will come to the forefront. Whether or not the state concentrates its transportation issues on roads, or whether it concentrates development on transit, is going to be a key discussion. I mean, you have representatives from rural areas that will not have any sort of access to transit, and why should they vote for more urban or improved urban transportation? That's going to be a key issue in the General Assembly, particularly with business. And then, as we look at this in Prince George's County, as you look at, for example, projects like New Carrollton that are starting to surface, New Carrollton Metro, then who's going to get pieces of those pies, right? Who's going to get the pieces to be able then to be a part of that development, and what is the level of assurance for Prince George's County businesses in particular to be able to then be a part of those kinds of economic development? And some of that may include the state in changing then some of the ways in which MBEs are invited to the table. And if I have more time, I would talk about that because I think there are some issues around that where the chamber could really begin to provide some leadership. But who gets at that table and when, and how they get at that table, are very key issues that I'm sure the General Assembly is going to be taking up.
Right. Well, that's wonderful. And that is so key and so true. So the gas tax, MBE legislation, any other areas that we need to really be paying attention?
Well, just to revisit the gas tax for a moment, one of the impacts of reallocating money from the transportation fund to other structural issues that required funding is that many of the transportation projects that would impact quality of life for Prince George's County residents has not occurred. 210, which is a major corridor to both the state of Maryland as well as to the district and coming through, because of the amount of development, the development that should have happened, the transportation projects along 210 that should have occurred have not. And that's just an example of many of the projects that have not been able to go forward because that money has been diverted to other things. And so replenishing that fund so that those kinds of projects can occur would impact not only businesses but the residents that have to travel and stay in their cars for hours because they can't widen the highway.
Right, exactly.
Well, and if literature would say, if you look at policy literature around this, transit-oriented development and in some cases roads, although I think more so transit-oriented development, provides then some land assembly and some opportunities for other kinds of businesses to locate there. The question then for the chamber and others is how broad of the opportunities is that going to be? So are we still going to see just the same old kinds of businesses getting these opportunities,
Exactly.
or is the door going to be open more to start? I think some small business and some locally grown business in Prince George's County, and candidly, I think that in this next phase of development, it would be interesting to see, and I would encourage the chamber to take on how do we grow business in Prince George's County. So the chains, for example, what I would argue, is not strong economic development. What they do is they provide some what I would call low-hanging fruit labor, but do not provide then the economic wherewithal where people can really begin to launch out on their dreams and begin then to hire within the county. And so to that extent, that's how you grow a tax base. You grow a tax base by growing locally, and so there'll need to be some policy and some incentives that allow for this to happen. And we need to sort of then pay attention to the extent that these opportunities are being provided.
And where they are provided,
Yes.
especially in Prince George's County, we
Yes.
have some underserved communities
Yes.
that are prime for some of the, especially transit-oriented development projects. And if the incentives are so that the projects can happen in those communities, then the businesses and the residents in those communities, that's the base of a lot of economic development in Prince George's County. So we need to look at both where it happens as well as
That's an excellent point, because we've heard a lot about New Carrollton, and I think that's great news for the county. But then what happens to Suitland?
Absolutely.
What happens to Naylor Road? What happens to those
Branch Avenue.
and
Branch Avenue, exactly.
What happens to those metro stations that can literally uplift those communities? If you look at our neighboring friends in Washington D.C., I went to Howard University in the late '70s, early '80s, and the U Street corridor has been transformed simply by having a metro station there, and then having a strong redevelopment authority that really began to change the landscape there. I think there's some other policy dimensions that we have to look at, but clearly that's a model that could be very useful in Prince George's County. Literally, how you could change a neighborhood from being one that was downtrodden to one that is vibrant.
Exactly.
And we could use that model, but there's going to have to be a discussion on equity.
Exactly.
There's going to have to be a discussion on making sure that every community has an opportunity to grow, and that happens through incentives. That happens through policy. That doesn't happen naturally through the marketplace, quite honestly. And until we begin to have those levels of discussion, then we're not going to have the kind of economic development that I think we all hope for.
Very good points, very, very good points. And we are here as a chamber organization to assist in that and helping that to bring awareness to that need for equity, bring awareness to those underserved communities and opportunities for businesses to relocate and build and grow community from the ground up. We're about to take another break. When we come back, I'd like to go into a little bit more detail and give you all time to think about this question. There's been an ongoing debate about the whole phrase of job creation and government's role in job creation versus business role in job creation. So we'll go into a little bit more detail on that when we come back.
Great question.
And go forward from there. So again, you're listening to Prince George's Chamber on the Move on 1580 AM. We have with us Octavia Caldwell of ROC Consultants, Chair of the Legislative Action Committee, and Senator David Harrington, former Maryland State Senator. Please stay tuned and join us back. Thank you again, Salcon Enterprises, for sponsoring this month's session. Welcome back to Prince George's Chamber on the Move. This is Rhonda Slade, and welcome to our brand new talk show on 1580 AM. Thank you again to Salcon Enterprises, our sponsor for this month, for allowing us to highlight local businesses and present Prince George's County as the destination for business. We have in the studio with us this morning, we've had a very lively discussion, and it's continuing on a great discussion on advocacy, since today is the first day of the General Assembly session in Annapolis. So we have with us Octavia Caldwell, owner of ROC Consultants and chair of our Legislative Action Committee at the Chamber, and Senator David Harrington, former Maryland State Senator, County Council Chair, and Mayor of Bladensburg. And before we went to the last break, I asked the question for you all to consider and to ponder about the debate, the ongoing debate about job creation, and whether it's a government issue or a business issue. So can you all go into a bit more detail on that, expound on that, and help us to understand where the proper place of job creation is?
Well, I don't think I would reframe, if you don't mind, reframe the question. That is, how do we create business, and what is the role of government, and the role and the role of business, if you will, in creating business? Because if you create business, then you hopefully will create jobs. And I go back then to the point that government does have a key role. Government can incentivize. Government can create the environment, the inviting environment through which business can come, if you will, and then government can create the marketplace. It can do more in directing business. So let me speak to the last point first. One of the things that really is not discussed enough is the power of zoning and the power of planning. And so when Octavia talked earlier, and we all talked earlier about places of neglect, the way that you change that is that then you create and this goes to the incentivizing piece, you create then the zoning and the planning that helps direct the marketplace. That is zoning is a key tool for economic development. And is so underutilized, I think, in Prince George's County, because we create plans, but then we don't then begin to create then the policy and the incentives around then driving the marketplace to certain areas. So that when we speak to job creation, we speak to the role of government, particularly local government can play an essential role into then driving the marketplace in areas of neglect. The other point that then I would make, and I certainly would look to Octavia to supplement these points and add to them, is again, I think we have to do much more in growing than Prince George's County jobs. I mean, I think again, it's one. We have some of the places where certainly the known businesses that come that we want to invest in Prince George's County. But if you really want to grow your tax base, then what you do is look at then providing places where homegrown businesses can establish. And because what does that do? That then you begin to create generational wealth.
Right.
And that's what's missing in the equation. And so when you bring in then the standing businesses, and I won't name any names, you're not creating generational wealth. You're creating then a tax base, but you're not creating the wealth. When you begin to then provide then entrepreneurship opportunity for homegrown businesses, then you're creating the wealth which feeds your nonprofit sector, which begins to then create jobs. And so when you do proper zoning, proper planning, incentivizing that planning, and then do home growth, then that's how then you create generational wealth and you create jobs.
That's true. One of the things that has not occurred in Prince George's County, and I think I see the pendulum swinging, is being intentional about creating high-paying jobs in the county,
Right.
attracting employers that can do that, as well as thinking about growing homegrown businesses. And a lot of that has to do with just looking at examining our tax base and ways that we can impact that different than has occurred in the past. And I'm thinking in particular, while it could affect some of the homegrown businesses, and that's the pending project, the Tanger Outlet. An excellent opportunity to create jobs at several phases as that occurs. Just talking with the developer the other day, and they were talking about 800 jobs right off the top of the head. That can be a tremendous impact for citizens in Prince George's County. And then as we take advantage of opportunities to be involved in development, commercial development, and get involved and become more knowledgeable about land use and zoning issues, we can then not be at the mercy of others who want to come in only. I think one of the reasons the Tanger project is getting a lot of attention is because right now they're trying to attract and bring in established institutions, but as we become more proficient in our land use and zoning, we can then focus on building homegrown businesses. And it's not an either or. I think both can happen at the same time. And that truly stimulates the economy around the whole issue of jobs creation. And it shows that there's room for both government, local government, as well as business to contribute to that type of development.
So if I can, let's use the Tanger project as a case study and join Octavia in this. This is a really good discussion, by the way. So here's two instances where you can homegrown business, but at the same time get a lucrative project, like Tanger, whatever your position is on that. Tanger's going to obviously ask for then some tax abatements or what's called tax incentive financing in order then to build, at National Harbor. Well, part of the conditions through which then a tax incentive financing bond can be delivered is to say, all right, then we're going to make room within that project for some homegrown local businesses. So that then within that, you're creating the kind of foot traffic for that business to succeed. So that's one thing. The other thing is that you have these, sometimes within these projects, you have these exclusive leases. So that, let's say, for example, you have a restaurant that moves in that caters to a certain clientele. Well, and it's it might be a relatively well-known restaurant. Well, what that restaurant may ask for is say, well, no other restaurant can move in to that area. But what we're doing is then we're shutting the gate for any kind of homegrown restaurant to be able to move in there, even though we might say that having this better-known restaurant move there, may be exciting and we could celebrate that. You're actually closing the door for other kinds of economic development to do that. So that's the policy piece that we have to begin to look at. When we have these exclusivity leases, when we don't provide some conditions for job creation within some of these, then in fact what we find is we're not creating the generational wealth that we thought. We have a good site and we have some economic development, but not the kind of really generational sort of pieces that I think we need.
So that again shows the connection between advocacy and a business-friendly, a true
Absolutely.
business-friendly
That's right.
environment.
That's true.
Right.
And that's where the chamber can play a major role in making sure that that's happening. I'm sorry.
Exactly. No, I totally agree, David. And in addition to that, one of the things that a project like the Tanger project brings is Prince George's County's base, primarily, is property taxes and income tax. And this introduces another revenue stream to the county that could be very beneficial to services to, and without having to raise other taxes to finance those kinds of things. And so I think we have to take a broad look at projects like that and how those projects open doors for opportunities that can benefit some of the homegrown businesses at the same time.
So very quickly, again, using Tenga as the case model, here's where then you can have alignments of interest that normally don't come together. You could say, for example, all right, the government provides then the incentive pieces, whatever they may be, but we could say, well, this could be a green project. And so we can create solar panels there. We can create, green infrastructure. We can green stormwater management there as part of the incentives. But now you have the environmentalists joining the business interest.
Absolutely.
You could say that, look, to live in Prince George's County, you need, some level of wages, and so you could create a living wage sort of position there that speaks to then labor interest and other interests. So it's creating these alignments of advocacy, which goes back to our earlier point. Let's not have these positions where we're contesting one another.
Exactly.
Let's find places where we all could share in knowing that the vision is about building strong economic development in Prince George's County, not whether or not Tenga is going to happen.
Right.
It's not whether or not Tenga is going to happen. It's like how we position Tenga to be strong environmentally, to create the kind of wages and tax base that we want, and then create the kind of business opportunities that's homegrown.
Wonderful. Well, again, thank you. This has been a phenomenal conversation. For listeners that would like to continue these types of conversations, please join us in our Legislative Action Committee meetings every Monday morning at 8:30 a.m. at the Chamber office located at 4640 Forbes Boulevard in Lanham, Maryland. For more information, please give us a call at 301-731-5000. This is Rhonda Slade, and you've been listening to Prince George's Chamber on the Move on 1580 AM.